When you think of a typical English summer, you probably picture mild days, green parks, and, maybe a bit of drizzle. But the summer of 2026 completely flipped that script. Today, we aren't just looking at a run-of-the-mill heat wave, we're breaking down what experts are calling the Great Heat Reset. Let's dive right into this explainer and unpack the science, the numbers, and the stark reality of what happened on the ground.
Here's how we're breaking things down today. First, the 2026 heat spike. Then, England's flash drought, followed by the human cost, the climate connection, and finally, preparing for the future.
All right, let's jump into Section 1, the 2026 heat spike.
What was absolutely wild about this event wasn't just the peak temperature itself, it was the relentless persistence of it. The national June record wasn't just broken once, it was shattered 3 consecutive days in a row. Gosport hit 36.1 degrees Celsius on day 1. The very next day, 36.8. And by day 3, Lingwood reached a blistering 37.7 degrees. To put that into perspective, that is basically 100 degrees Fahrenheit, in a country where residential air conditioning is practically non-existent.
A standard UK June averages a very comfortable 19 degrees Celsius, so spiking up to 37.7 is nearly a 20-degree leap above the historical norm, and the Met Office verified that the entire month ran almost 3 degrees hotter than average. For a historically temperate climate, this isn't just a slight anomaly, it's a massive system shock.
And get this, it wasn't even just an isolated summer surprise. Spring had already laid down a pretty dangerous foundation. Back in May of 2026, London hit 35.1 degrees, officially wiping out an 82-year-old record from 1944. These back-to-back record-breaking seasons basically left the environment completely defenseless for what came next.
Which leads us right into Section 2, England's flash drought.
Enter the flash drought. So unlike your traditional droughts that sort of creep up over several seasons, a flash drought strikes with terrifying speed. It literally bakes the soil and drains the rivers in a matter of weeks. By late July, the Environment Agency had to declare a drought across half of England. River flows that you'd normally expect to see at the end of September were happening in July, a full 3 months ahead of schedule.
7%. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the total amount of expected rainfall southern England actually received for the entire month of July, and in some really unlucky pockets, it was as low as 1%. Major rivers didn't just recede, they practically vanished at a historic pace. The cascading effects from this were immediate. Official drought zones were declared across 7 key regions, including London and the Thames Valley, and that triggered strict hosepipe bans for 20 million people. This officially marked the UK's 5th drought in 10 years. So what used to be a rare, once-in-a-generation crisis is rapidly transforming into an expected annual battle.
Moving on to Section 3, the human cost.
This is where the numbers get incredibly sobering. When extreme heat hits, it kills quietly. During the notorious 2022 heatwave, when temps first broke 40 degrees, the UK saw 3,200 excess deaths over the entire summer. But in 2026, it took just May and June to reach 2,877 excess deaths. In merely 2 months, the fatalities were already rivaling the entirety of the 2022 summer.
A 20% spike in anti-admissions completely overwhelmed the system. And here's what public health experts found most alarming. The victims weren't just the elderly or the highly vulnerable. Middle-aged, perfectly healthy people who were just working outdoors were collapsing. Ambulances were breaking down in the heat, response times plummeted, and officials had to issue a red alert national emergency for London and the southeast.
Let's shift gears a bit and look at Section 4, the climate connection.
So what is actually driving the shifting baseline? Well, globally, the UK has warmed by about 1.2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times. But if you zoom out just slightly to Western Europe as a whole, that number jumps to 1.7 degrees. Because of some really unique shifts in atmospheric circulation, Western Europe is actually heating up at a disproportionately faster rate than much of the globe.
Now, attribution scientists are super careful not to say climate change directly causes any single weather event, but human-induced warming massively loads the dice. Current models are showing that a heat wave of this intensity is now at least 4 to 6 times more likely than it would have been back in the 19th century. We simply wouldn't be seeing this level of devastation without that shifting climate dial.
Which brings us to our final section, preparing for the future.
The reality is, our infrastructure was built for a temperate climate, and it is visibly buckling under the strain. Up in Norfolk, farmers literally had to cull livestock because boreholes were dropping a meter a week and they couldn't grow feed.
Underground, Thames water saw pipe leaks jump 30% as the clay soils shrank and cracked. And above ground, British trains running slow is a bit of a well-known punchline, but this time they were crawling just to prevent the steel tracks from buckling in the heat. Even airports had to limit takeoffs because the hot, thin air couldn't generate enough lift for the planes.
You might think, okay, we just need to wait for the rain to return. But the National Drought Group's outlook says otherwise. The moisture deficit in the soil got so deep that a normal rainy season simply won't fix it. We're talking 3 to 6 solid months of sustained, above-average downpours required just to refill those depleted groundwater reserves back to a safe baseline.
And here is the ultimate reality check we have to face. Met Office projections are clear. This is no longer a once-in-a-generation freak event. By 2050, summers as intense, dry, and deadly as 2026 could happen every single alternating year. The anomaly is quite literally becoming the pattern.
I want to leave you with this thought. The Great Heat Reset of 2026 proves that temporary preparation just isn't going to cut it anymore. If this level of extreme heat is our new normal, how quickly can our agriculture, our infrastructure, and our health systems shift to permanent adaptation? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.